So what did you do this summer? Well, according to a Moneris Commission Angus Reid survey, Canadians are rediscovering their own backyard with a new focus on domestic tourism. Here to discuss the findings of the survey is VP of Business Development at Moneris Data Services, Sean McCormick. Sean, first of all, welcome back.
Thanks, Al. How was your summer?
I was just going to ask you how your summer was. My summer was busy. We had a trip to Europe this summer, took the kids to Portugal so they can see their roots. But we also went to Ottawa. We're going to talk about that. And then I dropped my son off at university this week. So
wow,
I know
there's a milestone right there. Congratulations.
Thank you.
I maintain this, one of the single biggest challenges in life is ensuring that your son or daughter gets into a post-secondary institution. What a milestone and what an achievement.
Yes, and it was thankfully not a teary farewell. I think it's exciting for him and we're excited for him. But how about your summer? What did you do?
Well, believe it or not, Al, I traveled to the US a couple of times.
How dare you?
Which transitions into what we're talking about. No, I had to go. I had no choice. My son plays elite baseball, and American baseball tournaments are part of what you sign up for. But that definitely went against the trend of what we saw with Canadian tourism trends this summer that were a lot different than previous years.
Right. And so we're talking about this survey that Moneris commissioned Angus Reid to do for 2025. First of all, I mean, let's talk about the why. Why this survey?
Well, we worked with dozens and dozens of destination marketing organizations across the country to support their research into tourism. Moneris, we process 1 in every 3 transactions in the country. So in aggregate, we know where those transactions happen. Right. And from a tourism standpoint, that's really valuable to those public sector organizations to be able to understand and support domestic tourism in Canada and support all of the businesses that are in the tourism industry. And you may think tourism, well, that's a really niche kind of thing. There can't be too many businesses that rely on tourism. Well, if you've eaten in a restaurant in the last week, then you've engaged in commerce with a merchant that depends on tourism. Right. If you bought clothes somewhere, those merchants depend on tourism. If you've put fuel in your car, those merchants depend on tourism. It really touches most merchants in Canada, believe it or not.
All right. Now we're in September. So, I mean, tourism season's all year round in Canada, but the concentration of it is definitely summer. What time frame was used for this survey?
Well, we looked at Canadians' tourism intentions in the first half of the year, so Q1 and Q2. So from January 1 until June 30th. And what we found via this survey, so there were 2 parts of this. There was the survey data and then the spending data, and we're trying to understand how those correlate. More than a quarter of Canadians changed or postponed or canceled U.S. travel plans in 2025. It was actually 26%. So 1 in every 4 people.
That's big.
Yeah, and there's a couple of different hypotheses around that. Politically, I mean, that's obvious. There were a lot of people that felt strongly about the politics happening right now. I would also suggest that the exchange rate also had an impact on Canadians' propensity to travel to the United States. If you travel to the US between January, February, March, and April, chances are pretty good that you had an eye-watering experience when you went to the bank to get American cash out, or if you were paying for anything on your credit card, you went for a $200 dinner and you saw a $300 debit on your credit card.
Yes.
So at 1.5, it was approaching 1.5, and well, the exchange rate was between 1.44 and 1.46. But by the time the exchange fees and the foreign exchange fees were on top of that, you were talking 1.5. And that is enough to make people think twice about where they're spending their tourism dollars.
Sure. So that's up in the first half of the year for sure. And I mean, we've had a couple of months of the summer that aren't accounted for in this survey. But I mean, I just had chief economist from BMO, Douglas Porter, on last month, and he talked about, the biggest effect Canadians can have during this kind of moment of trade uncertainty would be where to spend their tourism dollars. So some of that is happening. The Buy a Canadian movement, definitely impacting there. We've seen now that a quarter of Canadians did change their travel plans. What was the effect on the spending during that time?
Yeah, well, of the respondents who did adjust their plans, 30%, so
Mm.
a third, basically a third of the people who said that they either changed, postponed, or canceled their US travel plans, a third of those people almost opted to travel to other Canadian provinces, and 44% stayed within their own province.
Wow.
So either they kept it local, maybe traveled slightly outside of the center, the urban center, or wherever they lived. And then 30% went to other Canadian provinces. And I'll tell you what, when we think about tourism, we think of foreign spending, right? We think
Right.
about the large swaths of people from France
Mhm.
that come to Montreal in the summertime. France is the number two foreign spending country in
Oh.
Quebec in the summertime. F1 is a massive tourism spending event
Mhm.
every spring in Montreal, and France creates an enormous share of that. But what we saw in that interprovincial spend was a few provinces, well, two provinces and one territory standing out. The transaction volume change, so the dollar volume getting pumped through Moneris's pipes from out of province spend happening in a certain province. In the territories, they saw a 10% increase during the period versus the same period last year. Alberta saw a 9% increase versus the same period the year before. And Saskatchewan was up 6% versus the year before. And every province had a positive year over year change. The lowest was BC with a 3% year over year change. And that one doesn't really surprise me to see it at only 3% because so many people already travel to BC, those interprovincial tourists, those interprovincial spenders. So many people already have BC on the agenda in the summertime.
Right.
That doesn't surprise me as much. They didn't have as much room to grow, whereas the territories, they got room to grow all the time and in basically any kind of research you're doing on spending. And then Saskatchewan and Alberta. I mean, it's in the summertime, those are a couple of places that you don't really think about going and spending tourism dollars. But I'll tell you what, I'm originally from out west. I got a ton of relatives in Saskatchewan in particular, and it's a beautiful place in the summertime. The
Mhm.
lakes in Saskatchewan are profoundly beautiful.
Right.
And then Alberta, you've got tourism destinations like Banff and Jasper, where people think about Banff and Jasper as being winter destinations, like you're going to go there and ski. Well, world class golf courses
Right.
in and around both of those areas. They're beautiful places in the summertime. And it seems like maybe with the 1.5 or the 150% exchange rate in the US combined with some political friction, people are starting to discover that from around Canada.
Yeah, and we had someone from the NGCOA on in June as well, and he projected it was going to be a pretty good year for golf courses in this country.
Yeah, I believe that. I'll have to listen to that one. It's funny, Al, like how many folks, are taking up golf again. Like take yourself back 15 years ago. I remember stories about, wow, golf and, golf anywhere around the world. It's 18 holes. It takes too long. People don't have enough time to get around to golf in. Golf is dying. Tiger Woods is retired. This is it. It's got to change. And then I feel like there was a generational sort of like shift that we were just caught in the middle of there for a few years, which was maybe older Canadians or just older people in general were maybe not golfing as much and because they were, getting on in years. And then you had
Right.
this next generation of potential golfers that were too young,
Mhm.
they had other things to do than spend 4.5 or 5 hours on a golf course. Well, now 15 years later, those people are between 35 and 50. And I have a lot of friends between 35 and 50 that are avid golfers now. But 15 years ago, they were between 20 and 35 and golf was off of their radar.
Right.
So I think golf as a tourism driver, I think the ceiling is really high.
And you can't discount the pandemic effect as well. I
Right?
interviewed a couple of golf course owners who said their busiest time was during the pandemic because it's one of the few activities you
Right?
could do socially distanced and
Right.
outdoors, right? So I think there was a bit of a boom there as well. Now we're talking about, how many people didn't go to the US, but stayed in Canada, but there were other destinations as well, like Mexico and Europe. What did the numbers say about that?
Yeah, so the question we posed was, what did you do as a result of changing your US trips? As I said, 44% traveled within the province, 30% traveled to other Canadian provinces, 13% said they traveled to Mexico, the Caribbean, or South America. So sunny destinations, warm destinations. 20% said that they went somewhere else, i.e. Europe. That's basically what's left there, the lion's share. So, the distribution, if you're not traveling within your own province, the distribution between other Canadian provinces and traveling to other destinations that were not sunny destinations, fairly even.
Yeah, it certainly sounds like it's been a banner year. And the World Travel and Tourism Council agrees. They show that Canadian domestic tourism is projected to reach $104 billion in 2025, more than double last year's growth rate. Those are amazing numbers. Sean, before I let you go, though, I hear that next month the Elevate Festival takes place in Toronto, and you're going to be speaking at it.
Yeah, we're going to be talking about startup culture and how it really drove the early days of the data business at Moneris.
Well, I always look forward to Elevate Festival every year, so I'll definitely be in attendance when you speak. Thank you so much for your time today. Where can folks learn more about data services or follow you?
Dataservices.moneris.com.
Okay, thank you so much for your time today, Sean.
Thanks, brother.